Namaskritya Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Taddo Jayamudire Shrinvadam Sugata Krishna Punyashravana Kirtana Vradayantasto Hi Vadrani Vidonudi Suprasadam Nashta Prayasha Vadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavate Rattamashloke Bhaktir Bhavadinashtiki. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 24, titled Chanting the Song Sung by Lord Shiva, verse 29. Swadharvanishta Shatajanma Vippuman Virinchatam Eti Tata Param Himam Avyakritam Bhagavadota Vishnavam Padam Yataham Vibudha Kalatye Swadharmanishta Shatajanma Vippuman Virinchatam Edi Tata Param Himam Avyakritam Bhagavato Pada Vishnavam Padam Yataham Vibudha Kalatyaye. Synonyms: Swadharma Nishta, one who is situated in his own dharma or occupation. Sata Janmabihi, for 100 births. Puman, a living entity. Virinchatam, the post of Lord Brahma. Eti, gets. Tata, thereafter. Param, above. He, certainly. Mam, attains me. Avyakritam, without deviation. Bhagavata, unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Atha, therefore. Vaishnavam, a pure devotee of the Lord. Padam, post. Yata, as. Aham, I. Vubudha, the demigods. Kala, Tyaye, after the annihilation of the material world. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation: a person who executes his occupational duty properly for 100 births becomes qualified to occupy the post of Brahma. And if he becomes more qualified, he can approach Lord Shiva. A person who is directly surrendered to Lord Krishna or Vishnu in unalloyed devotional service is immediately promoted to the spiritual planets. Lord Shiva and other demigods attain these planets after the destruction of this material world. Purport: this verse gives an idea of the highest perfection of the evolutionary process. As described by the Vaishnava poet Jayadeva Goswami, Pralaya Payodi Jale Kritavan Ashivedam. Let us begin tracing the evolutionary process from the point of devastation, Pralaya, when the whole universe is filled with water. At that time, there are many fishes and other aquatics, and from these aquatics evolve creepers, trees, etc. From these insects and reptiles evolve, and from them birds, beasts, and then human beings, and finally civilized human beings. Now, the civilized human being is at a junction where he can make further evolutionary progress in spiritual life. Here it is stated, Swadharma Nishta, that when a living entity comes to a civilized form of life, there must be Swadharma, social divisions according to one's work and qualifications. This is indicated in Bhagavad Gita 4.13. Chatur Varnyam Maya Shrishtam Guna Karma Vibhagashaha. According to the three modes of material nature and the work ascribed to them, the four divisions of human society were created by me. In civilized human society, there must be the divisions of Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra, and everyone must properly execute his occupational duties in accordance with this division. Here it is described, Swadharma Nishta, that it does not matter whether one is a Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, or Shudra. If one sticks to his position and properly executes his particular duty, he is considered a civilized human being. Otherwise, he is no better than an animal. It is also mentioned herein that whoever executes his occupational duty, Swadharma, for 100 births, for instance, if a Brahmana continues to act as a Brahmana, becomes eligible for promotion to Brahmaloka, a planet where Lord Brahma lives. There is also a planet called Shivaloka or Shivaloka, which is situated in a marginal position between the spiritual and material worlds. If, after being situated in Brahmaloka, one becomes more qualified, he is promoted to Sadashivaloka. Similarly, when one becomes even more qualified, he can attain the Vaikuntha Lokas. The Vaikuntha Lokas are targets for everyone. even the demigods. And they can be attained by a devotee who has no desire for material benefit. As indicated in Bhagavad Gita 8:16, one does not escape material miseries even if he is elevated to Brahma Loka. Brahma Bhuvanan Loka Punar Avartino Arjuna. Similarly, one is not very safe even if he is promoted to Shivaloka, because the planet of Shivaloka is marginal. However, if one attains Vaikuntha Loka, he attains the highest perfection of life. And the end of the evolutionary process, Mam Upeti tu Kaunteya Punar Janmana Vidyade. In other words, it is confirmed herein that a person in human society who has developed consciousness must take to Krishna consciousness in order to be promoted to Vaikuntha Loka or Krishna Loka immediately after leaving the body. Tyaktva deham punarjanma naiti mam eti so Arjuna 4.9 Bhagavad Gita. A devotee who is fully in Krishna consciousness, who is not attracted by any other loka or planet, including Brahma Loka and Shiva Loka, is immediately transferred to Krishna Loka, Mam Eti. That is the highest perfection of life and the perfection of the evolutionary process. End of the report. Namam Vishnupadaya Krishna Preshthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswate Devi Gauravani Pracharini Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Bhaskyatyadeshatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivas Sadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. I humbly seek the blessings of all assembled Vaishnavas. Thank you for the opportunity to read and summarize from Srimad Bhagavatam today for my own purification. I'll try to summarize based on Srila Prabhupada's purport and one of the lectures I learned from a senior Vaishnava. Please forgive if I add my own interpretation to the summary. So we are in this chapter where the Prachetas, per the instructions of their father, Prachini Barhi, are meditating. And then Lord Shiva, being pleased with their austerities, appears in front of them and starts giving instructions to how even more perfect their meditation process. And Prabhupada writes in purports, in different purports that getting the audience of Lord Shiva is not an easy feat. And Lord Shiva, as we know, is like the topmost Vaishnava. And he's, as we saw in yesterday's verse, the last line of the purport yesterday, Prabhupada says, the conclusion is that a devotee of Lord Shiva is not dear to Lord Shiva, but a devotee of Lord Krishna is even dear, or is very dear to Lord Shiva. So if there is a sincere devotee trying to worship Krishna, and then Lord Shiva gets very, very pleased, and then he comes also, as we heard yesterday, in the form of a spiritual master. He may come in the form of a spiritual master also, and then guide the devotee even better to reach Lord Krishna. So in this particular verse for today, we see how there's mention of the different lokas, like specifically the Brahma Loka, Shiva Loka, and then Vaikuntha Loka. And again, this is another amazing purport by Srila Prabhupada, where he kind of mentions about the entire Krishna consciousness, like in a nutshell. I mean, Prabhupada talks about how there are so many different species and how they evolve, and then how there is a difference between the different species and the human species, and then what the goal of the human species is, and then how one can perfect oneself by utilizing this human birth, and then what the ultimate goal of the human birth is, that to reach Vaikuntha Loka and not settle elsewhere like the Brahma Loka or Lord Shiva or Shiva Loka. And then, so this is the high level kind of summary of the purport, where the whole fundamentals of Krishna consciousness and the purpose and everything is kind of detailed by Srila Prabhupada. So in the purport, Prabhupada talks about how there are like so many different species, and then he points to the Savatara Stotra, Pralaya Payodi Jale, Dhritavanasi Vedam, where everything starts. There is Pralaya everywhere, then the water species evolve, and then they become they transform into fishes and aquatics, and So this whole evolutionary process is described. And then Prabhupada says finally human beings and finally civilized human beings kind of evolve. So as we know, this whole evolution process is based on consciousness per the scriptures. And it's like if a person gets 100% marks, then actually before that, we see here how like the evolution changes the consciousness, and so far until the human birth, it's basically an experiential process. So um, all the other species, like the species is before human being, they're all learning by just experience. But then they don't have any freedom. They just have to go through their karma process, and then they finish one birth, and then they get promoted. So that's how they come up to the platform of the human beings. But then the human beings, the main difference is that there is a little bit of freedom, and there is also an opportunity to learn not only by experience but also by hearing process. And Prabhupada always gives this example that an intelligent person just sees by or learns by seeing uh, or hearing, but an unintelligent person has to learn only by experience. And this is where the human birth is differentiated, that there is this opportunity to hear and learn in this human birth. So Krishna created so many other species also because they were rebellious and they didn't want to learn by hearing. So they wanted to learn by experience. And that's why they are going through that whole process. And then finally, we are so fortunate that we are at this point where we are civilized human beings. And even more fortunate situation is that we are realizing how this whole evolution actually happens and how glorious this birth is, the human birth is, where we can perfect by simply the process of hearing. So this is a big privilege that we have received through um, mercy of Krishna and so many others. And here again, the mention is about the Shiva Loka and Brahma Loka, and Prabhupada talks about how even if one attains the Shiva Loka or Brahma Loka, it's not permanent, and they're all still temporary, and they're all marginal. And this is compared to like how a student, he might get 100% marks, and then he might get into a prestigious college like an IIT or one of the Ivy League colleges here. But if he only gets 98%, then he may go to some colleges that are like not top ranked. So that's compared to like Shivaloka. And then if he gets even more lesser marks, like 96%, then he goes to Brahmaloka. And then 50%, he might come back to this earth. And lower than that, he may take birth in the Patala Lokas and different species. So this is the analogy given that if you want to, the highest position or the highest destination we should aim for is the Vaikuntha Loka. And that should be, that is in fact the target for everyone, but they don't know the exact process, or we have to go reach out to the scriptures to know the exact process to reach the Vaikuntha Loka, the ultimate destination. And I mean, this is also very analogous with the other example Prabhupada gives about the elevator example, that if you want to reach the fifth floor, you could take the stairs or you could take the elevator. And taking the stairs gets you to the same destination, but it includes a lot of distractions and it takes a long time. But taking the elevator is like straight, no distraction, and then it's just like stop point to point. And that's how glorious the Krishna conscious process is, that it is the elevator approach. Um, and there's others, a lot of people have this misconception that Lord Shiva, I mean, according to the Shiva Purana, Lord Shiva is a supreme person or the topmost God. But again, we have to understand that, I mean, even we know about Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma only because of the scriptures. I mean, they exist because, I mean, we know of their existence because of the scriptures. So likewise, we have to also refer to the scriptures to understand their position. And clearly, Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, there is mention that how Lord Shiva, of course, he is like a god, but he's a god of the material world. But in the spiritual world, his position is more of is of a service to Supreme Lord Krishna, and he facilitates the whole creation of the material world. So he has a role to play, but he's not the supreme personality of Godhead. And as we also have been seeing in this section, that he's most pleased when one directly worships the Supreme Lord Krishna. And then again, coming back to the glorious position of the human birth, we see that Lord Chaitanya has given us this chanting process of Hare Krishna. And then in this verse, it's mentioned that if one perfectly executes his Varnashram Dharma for 100 years, then he could get birth in Brahmaloka. And then again, in this Kali Yuga, as we know, the Manda Sumanda Matayo, so nobody can do anything perfectly, especially in this age. And even by doing that, you only get to the Brahmaloka. And then you have to do a lot more perfect things to get to the next level, which is Shivaloka. Then finally, Vaikuntha Loka, which is very, very difficult. But whereas this whole process of Hare Krishna chanting can help us achieve more than following what Varnashrama Dharma is telling us here. Again, if you can perfectly practice Varnashrama Dharma, the position of Brahmaloka is guaranteed. But by simply chanting process, I mean, simply meaning by having faith in that process, then one can even achieve far more than the Brahmaloka and Shivaloka, which is the Vaikuntha Loka. So this is a very, very auspicious opportunity that we have. And Srila Prabhupada has always reminded us in different purports and lectures that if we are intelligent, we will understand this information, and then we will practice the process of Hare Krishna chanting. And we have to chant to the best of our abilities. And also the mood of chanting is again elaborated by so many acharyas, that we understand that our chanting is not perfect or is not to the mark when we are chanting in the early stages. And even when we have been chanting for many, many years, it still may not be in the perfect place. But then we have to have the mood we should be chanting in a prayerful mood to Krishna, always remembering that our constitutional position is to serve the Supreme Lord. And we are trying to serve him right now by chanting his holy names. And we need support from Krishna and the acharyas to do this. So if we have this very prayerful mode, humble mode, and our intention, if it's very, very clear, then we will get help from superior acharyas and this disciplic succession, so we could chant even better. And again, we have received this opportunity to read and hear from Srimad Bhagavatam every day, which is like a direct product from Veda Vyasa, who is also a Shakti Avatar, the Supreme Lord himself. And Veda Vyasa, as we know, in the first canto, talks about how although he wrote so many different things, but nothing could satisfy him. And that's when, again, the Supreme Lord sent Narada Muni as a guru, as a guiding factor. And then at that point, Narada Muni clarified to him that although he has written so many works, but he has not exclusively glorified the Supreme Lord Krishna. That is what the missing piece is. And then as soon as Vedavyas compiled this Bhagavatam, Srimad Bhagavatam, which is compared to kind of the rising moon, and then the cooling rising moon, and then he felt so much satisfaction. And then he also writes his experience in Srimad Bhagavatam that the people are unnecessarily suffering in this world. And then the only remedy is to take up to this Srimad Bhagavatam process, hear attentively, and then meditate on the pastimes of the Supreme Lord. And then people don't have to suffer unnecessarily, and they can just focus on their devotional practices. So this parallel paths of like hearing and chanting is the perfect recipe for this human birth. And if we utilize this opportunity and then practice this, the processes of hearing and chanting to our sincerest abilities, then we can make this life perfect. And then, as mentioned here, we can easily achieve the Vaikuntha Loka. And we don't need anything else to do. We just have to attentively hear and chant. So with that, I'd like to conclude the summary for today.